Welcome back, Planeswalkers, to another episode of the Hive Mind. My name is Jon Dunning, and this is the show where I traverse the multiverse in search of other prominent members of the Magic the Gathering community. And before I introduce this Planeswalker of the Magic the Gathering community, I would like to talk real quickly about the good people that bring you this show and make this show possible, and that's the good folks from cardsphere.com. So if you have unwanted Magic cards that you want to trade in for that sweet Karn or any of the other awesome stuff from M19 coming out, I always want to say M19. It just rolls off the tongue. But if you want to trade up for that, go to cardsphere.com for all your buying, selling, and trading. Also, if you want to get these cool swag like this hat, t-shirts, bags, other great stuff, go to txcp.store. That's txcp.store, and you could enter the promo code Hive Mind, and you could get your 15% off all your cool Card Sphere swag. So without further ado, I want to introduce the very prominent planeswalker, planeswalking in from Philadelphia, Mr. Nathan Holt. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been wanting to get you on the show for so long. And I have to say, I noticed that there is the Necromancer robe in the dry cleaners?
It is in the hallway. I could find somebody to wear it if you want a cameo. We'll put it that way. If you have two sets of questions, I'll just I'll ask if he's available. I'll leave that up to you. So.
I know we only booked one person, so I think it's be careful what you wish for, right? You don't want that guy is kind of a loose cannon.
He's a loose cannon. He's not the most polite. He's terribly insecure. So those types of people are a little unstable.
Sure. Well, first off, and usually we jump right into your Magic origin story and all that, but you did just planeswalk back from the horrible frying pan that is the desert, GP Las Vegas 2018. You survived. How was it, sir?
I did survive. 100-degree days. We stayed actually in a little Airbnb, and I decided to walk to the convention each day. So it only takes you about 5-6 minutes for a pasty Irish boy like myself to get completely crisped. So, but putting that aside, it was a really great time. What my partner Sean and I do nowadays is really visit people in their homes, and film them in their kitchen and meet their mothers and things. So we actually don't get to many events anymore. So this was kind of a special treat in that regard.
Excellent. Yeah. I did 22 years out in that toaster oven, and man, I'll tell you, even though I'm half Russian boy, it's still you never get used to 120.
No, you don't. Did you see the beta Rochester draft that happened at GP Vegas?
Absolutely. That was like 20th wonder of the world. That thing was amazing.
Unreal. I was lucky enough to be the scribe who wrote down all the picks as they picked them furiously. So yeah, I got a cramp in my hand, but I kept my own handwritten sheets as a piece of memorabilia too. I'm like, I don't know what those will be worth, but maybe 75 cents if I foil them out somehow. So
sure. I mean, it caught on camera how just like the tension in there and the excitement was absolutely palpable. How was it like at ground zero watching that stuff get open?
It was intense. There was this moment right before the judge cracked the first pack where Wizards had provided the players with like white gloves, like soft felt gloves or something. But they were all trying it out on like a normal basic land, and they realized that they couldn't like pick it up off the table. Like the fingers on the gloves were like too soft, and they were like, what should we do? What's worse, like sliding it across the table or getting our finger oils on it? And they were like kind of conferring, but most of them ended up just taking the gloves off so that they could just pick up a Magic card the way they're used to. But it was amazing to see people like pick there's average 4 lands per pack. There was one pack that had like 7 lands. And to see people pick basic lands above playable cards, it was just incredible, because the basic lands are worth something. And but they were playing for an alpha starter deck. That was the first prize. And I mean, it was unreal. I would have given my left arm to trade places with any one of them. So,
did they get to keep the cards, or something happened with them? Yeah.
No, they kept the cards, and no proxies are allowed. So it was like, oh, you just drafted Time Walk, you just drafted Mox Emerald. If you want it in your deck, you're gonna play it. If you want it in plastic, then it's fine. And all these decks, I mean, I don't know if you play much limited, but you're used to putting like 17 lands in a deck, maybe 18.
Sure.
These guys all had to put like 22 lands in their decks because they're just the high land count. Plus, it's just some cards are just not even as good as a 20th land. So there's some really unplayable cards, but.
Well, the lands plus all the Moxes and the Black Lotuses, so I'm sure fixing was not a problem.
No, you just could play as many lands as you wanted, But yeah, they opened 2 pieces of power, 3 dual lands, plus a time vault, a Wheel of Fortune. It was pretty nice pulls. I mean, so I got a kick out of that.
So going from that, so you were kind of sitting there watching this amazing historic event. Let's scale it all the way back to little Nathan Holt. Okay. What is your Magic origin story?
Yeah, well, that's funny that we kind of started here and go back because it was, those cards. I mean, I'm an East Coast kid, so we didn't really see any alpha or beta out our way. But Revised was huge, and that's when I started. So it was awesome to watch that beta draft because I'm watching people play Gray Ogre and Crawlworm. It's like legit good cards, as they're playing for high stakes. And that's how I started as well. I was 12 years old, I guess, in 1994 when I started playing. And, I have a similar story to a lot of people. Bought a starter deck, couple of boosters, worked my way up to a shoebox full of crappy cards, traded my dual lands for Force of Nature and Lord of the Pit.
You too, huh? You too.
Totally. I was as suspect to, those older kids trading for what they knew was more valuable. But whatever. I mean, it was about having fun. I mean, I maybe if I hadn't built that Breeding Pit, Lord of the Pit deck, I wouldn't have loved Magic as much as I do, and now here I am, and Magic is my job. So maybe it was a good investment.
Did you do the Ebon Praetors and all that too in that Breeding Pit deck?
Oh yeah, that rings a bell. I'm trying to remember what that one did.
That was the weirdest art in Magic the Gathering history. It was a black card. I think it cost 6. I think it was like a 3/3 or something terrible. And it had the little guy. I don't know if I mean, you're a dad. You might have seen Adventure Time, but he actually really looked like Death.
Right.
Yeah, and he had like the Easter Bunny around him and stuff. I don't know what the hell was going on in that.
Right.
That art in that card.
Yeah. The Ebon people or Ebon or whatever it was. I played with some of those cards. Order of the Ebon Hand was like a really popular card in my play group at the time.
Sure.
It was funny flashing forward again to this beta draft, and Luis Scott Vargas, who made it to the finals, did so largely because he was blanking his opponent with these circles of protection, main decking them. And those were the first cards that got like banned from my casual play group, where it was like, there was no like established culture in a like there is for Commander these days, where friends can decide which cards need to be taken out of decks. But I remember it just being like everybody was just like, stop it with these circles of protection. I only play one deck. You always know that I'm going to come play this blue-black deck, so stop it with these circles of protection. So that, I mean, we had all the cattiness of kids who are really competitive with one another. I remember a friend bringing a brand new deck one time, and it was 20 forests and 20 scrib sprites. I mean, those were good old days. 40 card decks and no limits on anything, and we thought it was lame. The kids, the competitive kids would really play like 20 mountains, 10 fireballs, 10 lightning bolts.
And that was the competitive scene back. That was the sports back then.
Absolutely. Those were the kids who were like playing for Ante and stuff, probably played for Ante like 2 or 3 times and then was just like, well, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah, forget this noise.
Yeah. So that's my origin story right there. But I did take a long break from the game and came back to it as an adult, really, like in my late 20s. So there was like a 14 or 15 year hiatus there. But when I came back, it was like at a time when I was like very partially minimally employed, at times unemployed. And so I had a lot of time to kill. I was always moving around. I was in a long distance relationship. And so Magic kind of became my spouse, so I play with my brother, 5 days a week and completely obsess over coverage and online content. And that's kind of how I got really involved in the community and took it from there. So,
and that was really like what, circa 2011. I think that's right when maybe New Phyrexia was just out or kind of rotating out to Innistrad.
Yeah, exactly. That's when. So it was in the fall of 2011 that my partner Sean and I showed up to Pro Tour Philadelphia, which was the first modern Pro Tour. So this is when Modern was a Wild West format with totally broken combo decks. Blazing Shoal had to get banned after this Pro Tour because you just swing with an Inkmoth Nexus on turn 2 and Blazing Shoal for the win.
Seems fine.
Yeah, it seemed totally fine. I kind of miss it. I kind of like it. It was just so crazy. But yeah, the Wild Nacatl deck did make the finals of that Pro Tour. So in any case, yeah, we just showed up and made a video there that got some traction online. Also because Evan Irwin made like a remix of 1 minute of the video to the Everyday I'm Shuffling hip hop, summer jam banger that was popular at the time.
Sure.
As Brian Kibler was like crazily shuffling his hand. So,
we really have to blame Brian Kibler for the hand shuffle.
Oh yeah. I not only that, I blame him for that, and I give him credit for being a big part of why we came to exist.
Sure.
Not just because of that viral video, but he was one of the first pros to really champion our work. And this is like back when Kickstarter, like most people had never heard of it. I had never heard of it. And Sean sold me on it. And so Brian and Finkel and Chapin, Chris Pakula, these guys all, donated $100 to our $1,000 Kickstarter. And after that, we made one more video at 2011 World Championship in San Francisco, which is also when Christine Sprankle kind of invented cosplay. This is a time when the only people in costume in the hall were her and me wearing my silly wizard, or rather a person wearing a wizard robe.
Right. Same character.
Yeah. So it was cool. It was a formative time in Magic's history. They were expanding coverage. They were hiring new people. And so that's kind of my like coverage origin story.
Awesome. And let's go back to kind of the early times a little bit before we move on. What's your experience with competitive play, if any?
So I very much identify as a casual player. I see myself as a Johnny and a Vorthos, so I really am into flavorful decks and weird combo decks. The weirder, the jankier, the better. You know, I like to brew lots of modern decks on Magic Online, and it's always like I would one of my favorite things to do would just be like to go on Gatherer and hit random card and try to build a deck themed around that card. So one time it was like Surge Node, you know, a 1-mana artifact that has 6 charge counters that allows you to move a charge counter onto another artifact. So I was like, all right, you know, Titan Forge, we're going to win with vanilla 9/9s. Yes, right. So, but competitively, I did kind of dip my toe in. There was a time when my self-esteem was directly, especially when you're unemployed, and you feel like you're not doing the best in life, and you know, suffering from depression, some mild bipolar, and you know, so it would be like at my draft at FNM would really. If I 3-0'd, I felt like I won the Pro Tour, and if I 0-3'd, I would be very depressed for like 3 or 4 days afterwards, because there is a competitive side with me. I eventually realized that it wasn't really healthy for me to kind of embrace that aspect of my personality, but that I could compete and find my place in the meta game in a different way. So I thought I had some skills with content creation that filled a need in the community, and that I could sort of compete with myself, you know, and really try to do my best in that world. But that all aside, I will say that I have a 100% day 2 rate at constructed Grand Prix.
Nice.
I've never missed day 2 at a constructed Grand Prix. I'm 1 out of 1.
That's great. Yeah, statistics.
I almost feel like I can never play a constructed Grand Prix again because I just don't want to ruin that stat. But yeah, I played in, it was Grand Prix New Jersey. It was a Legacy Grand Prix. It was at the time the largest Legacy Grand Prix of all time and the 3rd largest GP of all time at the time it happened. And I borrowed a Sneak and Show deck from my friend Taya Steele. And I basically studied a bunch of Huey Jensen videos and chatted with Brad Nelson about the deck a lot. And, you know, studied and did really well. And after that, I was like, okay, I think I've proved to myself that I can be good if I really try. Now I don't want to try anymore. So
yeah,
I
retire
go back
on the top. That's it.
Totally. Yeah. So, but mostly we play like 5-player games in my casual play group. We call it the Pentacle. And we play so that the 2 people sitting across from you are your opponents, and the people sitting on the sides of you are your allies. So it creates all these fun political dynamics. It's not competitive at all, but we take it very seriously. So I don't know.
Well, you need to coin that, you know, for before WotC makes another brawl out of it or something.
Oh,
like
right.
that.
Exactly. Yeah. No, the people at WotC know I'm the champion of this format. So if they design for it, I will insist on being on the design team, or something, or at least getting a card or something. So, you know, if and when that ever happens.
Well, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for being so candid about stuff like, you know, depression and all that. It's a very good time nowadays that, you know, a lot of people were kind of holding a lot of things in, and I feel like it is better that people are talking about it. You know, with everything that just happened with Wedge and everything at GP Vegas, it's just, you know, I just want to say thanks for being so candid about that. That's awesome, and it takes a lot of courage.
Thank you. I almost paused before I said that, but you know, the truth is that I want more people to speak up about this kind of stuff. I've been kind of hesitant myself, but you know, that's one big reason why I was really into making an episode of Enter the Battlefield about Jerry Thompson, who had discussed, you know, his issues with depression very publicly, especially in a long Reddit thread. where, people asked him. It was kind of like an impromptu AMA that ended up being about his depression. And so I feel like it was people like him kind of coming forward to help destigmatize that conversation. That that really inspires me. It's not easy to talk about, especially when it comes into a family dynamic. Because you don't want to like speak ill of your own family. In some ways, when there's like a lot of like mental illness is like such a multivariable thing. It's poorly understood. It's poorly treated. The healthcare situation in America is a huge mess, and mental illness is one of the most neglected, like areas of treatment for people. So there's so many different conditions, but there are certainly a lot of common ones. And, something like 1 out of every 10 people do suffer from depression, and they may or may not, they may or may not be fully aware of what's happening to them. Sure. They may or may not have coping skills that are easily taught, access to medication. They may or may not have that health coverage. I am extremely fortunate that my mom is a therapist. So being raised with somebody who is sensitive to these issues, and my wife is a clinical psychologist. So I have a lot of insight and a lot of luck, frankly, that has helped me cope with some symptomatic stuff. But I could tell horror stories if you want to, or you can ask Sean Kornhauser, my collaborator, how moody I was in our early works together. But the good news is in the last couple of years, I've been on new medications that have, I feel just so much better. Having kids will do that to you. You have 4 kids, right? So it pressures your sanity,
Yeah. You don't get 6 days as an adult, right?
Oh man, never. It's 24/7, 365 with these kids. So you got to be at your best. And I really, it forces you to deal with your own issues, So I was like, okay, I got to get more serious about treating this mental illness stuff. So,
and I have a lot of, it hits me where I live too. I just lost my father too. He was long life bout with paranoid schizophrenia and manic depression. So yeah, I've been dealing with that, and not me dealing with that. I've been helping him deal with that until he kind of lost the battle. So I completely understand what you're talking about. So
I'm so
that's
sorry
why it's important to. Oh yeah, no, I appreciate that. He was absolutely great, man. Big Beatles fan. Just a fun guy to have around. If you met him, you'd be calling him dad in the first 5 minutes. But it is. It's a huge problem, and I just appreciate you kind of talking about it. But kind of getting back to it, where you and Sean Kornhauser, where did you guys kind of meet up, and what made you decide to, we really like this game, let's put it on camera?
So Sean and I met because in our youth, meaning like our early 20s, we were both living in Philadelphia in this like DIY artist community. If you're kind of an art freak, and I was a performer, he was coming at it. He's a visual artist. He draws and sketches, but also made films. He attended film school for a year or two. And then left. But, they're just like, in Philly, it's like very grungy, more punk rock. It's kind of like closer to what the New York arts scene was like, say, in the 80s. Okay. Nowadays, like if you want to find funding and, find rich people to buy your stuff, New York is just a much better bet. But in these days, yeah, we were hanging out with people who would like rent a warehouse for like nothing, and a bunch of people would like live in there or like build studios, and there'd just be shows all the time. Shows in people's basements. I was in like a kind of a nerdcore hip hop, duo for a while with my childhood friend. And so you just meet all kinds of people, all artists of all different backgrounds at a show where, there's like a visual art thing, there's a performance, a musical performance of people, want to, go full hipster and make a Jurassic Park into a puppet play, like it just, really anything went. It was kind of a beautiful time. So he and I met and we made some really like cool, weird little films together. So we made a 15 or 20-minute version of Shakespeare's Othello, but with people dressed up as anthropomorphic cats. And everybody was awesome. A white cat except for Othello was a dark navy blue cat. And it was just kind of like these like confessional style things where people would speak to the camera and quotes and stuff, and just selecting a few scenes here and there. And it was like weird enough that it just got shown in art galleries, right? Like, or we would have some viewings. We made another film that was called The Cat People of Venice was the name of that.
Awesome.
Yeah. We made like a really weird movie at his aunt's farmhouse in New Jersey with this actress whose name was Manya. And it was just her alternating scenes of her doing mindless capitalistic behaviors in the city, like eating a bag of chips next to a piece of corporate park art, like a giant metal orb or something. And then it would cut to her like pushing a wheelbarrow full of manure on a farm. And it would just like cut back and forth. You know what I mean? So these are just like
Maro of you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We were just kind of, it was like full like art school, but we weren't in art school. We were just like, this was just our hobby, as we were kind of finding our craft. So, flash forward to 2011, and Sean said he wanted to make another video with me because he had enjoyed our previous collaborations. And I was super into Magic at the time, and I was like, well, here's a weird thing. I'm really into this nerdy card game called Magic the Gathering, and they have a professional tournament coming to Philly, and I'm pretty sure we can get a press badge. Do you want to do that? And he was like, sure. I wanted to make something where there's like a host on camera, on like cable TV or something. And so we just did it. I was super whacked out. I was bartending at like an after hours club at the time. So I was always operating on like 3 or 4 hours sleep, often hungover, kind of loopy, a little silly. So this video we made was very silly. I mean, so much of what I had done, in my career previous was like comedic by nature. We really didn't put a whole ton into it. We filmed for a couple hours on one day and a couple hours the next day and kind of slapped something together. And I think it just had the right tone of like, oh, this is like funny and silly, and it's like making fun of Magic, but it's clear that this guy Nate is a Magic player and loves Magic, so it's like a little more okay for him to like be poking fun at it.
It was good-hearted, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, for me, it was a love letter. It was like a love letter to the community. But when you're a comedian, you want to laugh at yourself, and so we kind of highlighted it. And I always like love the idea of just playing out these games as though there's a movie happening, so when you stick cobbled wings on like a I don't know, a worm or something. You're imagining like a crawl worm wearing wings flying in the air where it gets blocked by an owl. Maybe the owl was holding a sword,
Right.
like it just hilarious. Like how could that be anything but really funny? And so I always thought that there was just something so funny about the game. And I think like when this kind of broke into Infinity Fairies winning, you know what I mean? It was just like, oh, he enchanted a fairy and made infinity copies of a fairy, and that's how he won the game. And I think it was like for some people, it's like, yeah, that like is what happened. We don't think of it. We think of it as, oh, he just comboed off with this mechanic that creates a haste token, right, and that, blah, blah, blah. So I think it was just like a right place, right time situation for us to kind of find a niche or a voice in coverage.
Yeah, the observational or Magic has such a it lends so well to observational comedy, because you're right. Like when you're sitting down, and even I was watching some of the Walking the Plains and Enter the Battlefields the other night, and one part sticks out to me, and I think it was Brad Nelson and BBD and Joel Larson. They're all Joel Larson, and they're all sitting down, just kind of talking about it. And he's just like, yeah, but if you cast this on this turn, and then you play, this creature, and to people that don't have any context of it, people like talking about Magic sound nuts, and it's just totally great though.
Oh yeah, it's like it's a foreign language. When people ask me, like, oh, well, how hard is it to learn Magic? And I'm like, well, it's a little bit hard to learn it, but then once you got it,
yeah,
you're golden, and you can discover 10,000 different things in your own time. But it's kind of like, like learning German or something. Like I minored in German in college, so there's like some tough grammar up front, and people aren't used to cases and, 3 genders and whatnot. Well, once you get some of those fundamentals in place, then you can just take off from there. And there's like literally infinite combinations of cards and game states and things like that. And there's just like this endless world that awaits you in that way.
Absolutely. And let's talk a little bit about transform into Walking the Plains, and I was watching Walking the Plains, I think episode 1, and one, I think it was in Seattle, and one of the first cameos I saw on screen was a very young, still in a suit, Ben Bateman, which I'm like, oh man,
yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, I remember people saying like, whoa, look at this handsome Magic player, as we were doing like our dolly slide. I actually hate, like, I kind of wanted to get episode 1 like off the playlist, because I feel like it was like, no, we just hadn't found it yet. I feel like it was episode 3 when we kind of like found out what the series wanted to be, and I don't know. I think it's just I hate. Lots of artists will say like, I hate looking at my early works because it just looks so juvenile or whatever. But there's some people like just seeing how weird and like ad hoc we were, But yeah, that's funny that you remember that. It was awesome. It was our first day of coverage. Was also Marshall Sutcliffe's first day on coverage. So we met him at that GP, and we were like, hi, I'm starting for Wizards today. And he was like, me too. And, all these years later, and he's kind of like an institution there in coverage. So.
Well, I mean, so are you guys. And what is that feeling going from kind of doing the guerrilla shooting, the crowd funded, the Kickstarter funded, to now, transitioning to being commissioned by Wizards to do that? Did you ever think that it was going to go that way?
Well, they started commissioning us at that Seattle GP. But as far as like our process, a lot of it is still the same. We're a 2-man crew, and we just, we have our setup. We make documentaries now as opposed to like sketch comedy and event coverage. And I'm off camera now. So that definitely necessitated a lot of change. Certainly our workflow with Wizards has changed. But we've been with Greg Collins, who is our executive producer. He is the main guy for Wizards when it comes to event coverage. So he produces the Pro Tour and GP coverage and, all that stuff. And he's our producer too. And he's been extremely stable to work with. We're very lucky. Wizards has had a lot of turnover over the years, but he has been a very stable presence. And I think he is a big reason why we've able to have like this long-standing relationship with them, because we just have a nice chemistry with him.
Absolutely. And thinking about all those episodes, and probably episode 1, you said you'd rather kind of strike it from the playlist. But what are some of your favorite moments and some of your favorite episodes of either Walking the Plains or Enter the Battlefield?
Yeah, I think that like for me, what the peak of it was like probably, episodes like 16 to 24 or something, which is right in the middle. We made like 41 episodes. And that's where I feel like we were just at the absolute peak then, like, because we had enough experience so that we had really honed our production style. And for whatever reason, the writing there was good. And I think that some of our most popular episodes, episode 20, episode 22, episode 20 was the one I made with my family. It was a Thanksgiving dinner. And it's like this political argument between red and blue, so that everything is an analogy between Republicans and Democrats. But we talk about the colors of Magic, red and blue. And then I think it was 22 was probably our most well-received sketch, where my character, basically it was an homage to The Sopranos, when Christopher Moltisanti has an intervention from the other mobsters, Tony and Paulie or whatever, about his drug use. And it was the same thing for me, but it was for 41 card decks, addicted to these. So some of our big hits were in there. And then I think it's funny to admit this, but I think after I had a kid, which was a few episodes later, it became very difficult to maintain the quality. I was also just going through really hard personal times at that time. And we were also making this feature film for Netflix, Enter the Battlefield. So it was the confluence of like being stretched too thin by making a movie and Walking the Plains at the same time, having a baby in the house, and also my wife's father died, who I was very, very close to. And really kind of devastated us. He died like a week before our baby was born. So it was kind of just extraordinary. Yeah, I think that's when, between that and working on this movie, which was like my new obsession, it became harder to maintain Walking the Plains quality. And I think we still had a couple of really fine episodes after that, leading into the sunset. But yeah, I definitely think that middle period, like 16 to 24, 25, something like that, that was the best era for me.
So tell me about that, the idea and just the goal to kind of pull it off, be like, hey, we're going to make the first feature-length film documentary for Magic the Gathering, and then getting hooked up with Netflix. That must have just been crazy.
It was absolutely crazy. It took like 3 years to do. It started with Greg, who I mentioned, wanting to challenge us with a new project. So he proposed that we take on a new project. And he said he was kind of interested in some sort of like end of year recap of coverage, kind of like, here's a piece, a large piece that kind of like recaps what happened at the different Pro Tours and the storylines and whatnot. I was like, if we're going to make a big piece about the Pro Tour, like, let's just make it a movie. There's never been a Magic movie before. We work mostly in post-production. What everything else Greg is doing was live coverage. So we were his videographer guys, documentarians, and we just pushed really hard. And they bought in. So much credit to Wizards for buying in. And then it was a very long process of like selecting subjects, you know, courting subjects, and that changed all the time. Then
What
we
made you
ran.
decide to settle on
Yeah.
Owen Turtenwald?
So I'm trying to remember the exact process, but at some point we had picked Chris Pakula early on because we were told to really mitigate travel expenses. So we were like, he lives in Philly, we live in Philly, and we thought it was a great subject. And I had already done a podcast with him where he kind of explained his whole, like, I made one punt in the Pro Tour one time and that cost me the Hall of Fame.
Oh, man. What a story, that guy.
Unreal. I was like, that's one of the craziest stories I've ever heard. We should just get that on camera. And he is just a great subject and a good guy. So we locked in on him. I very much wanted to work with Melissa DeTora. I pushed super hard to have her in there because I did not want to make a Magic movie that was about a whole bunch of like white guys. You know,
Sure.
I was like, okay, it could be white guys and a woman. Please, let's have a woman. And it originally had Travis Wu as well, and I was sad that he didn't make the final cut, but to have some you know, Asian American representation as well. But for Owen,
he's definitely a character as well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Oh, honestly, Travis has all kinds of controversy. People have strong opinions about Travis, and I totally understand a lot of the heat that he takes. I
Sure.
don't even disagree with it. But you know, there are many sides to Travis. One of those sides is an extraordinarily good documentary subject, just because of how unique he is, you know, and how outspoken he is, and his whole approach to the game is very different. So he provided something for the movie that I think was lost, but it just had to be done. It just and ultimately we were very happy with how the movie ended up. But you asked about Owen. At some point, you know, Sean and I really wanted to make the World Championship like a major focus, because it's just something that an average person will understand. You know, like just the Pro Tours. I mean, there's 4 of them per year. Trying to explain why they're so awesome. I mean, no, it's like everybody knows what a World Championship is. You know, so let's have a climactic ending. You know, if you had seen King of Kong, or you know, there's this climactic championship, right? Or Spellbound was really, which is an amazing documentary about the kids spelling bee in Washington D.C. You know, that has like ESPN2 coverage and stuff like that. That film was the model for it, because they had like 9 different subjects in that movie, all with their own little mini stories, and it all culminated at this final championship. So that's what we wanted. But the thing is that how do you know who's going to be at the World Championship? You know, there's only 24 invites, and the standings are in flux all the time. So we picked Huey, Owen, and Reed. I think largely because A, we thought they were interesting subjects, and B, they were at the top of the pro point standings, and we felt very strongly that all 3 were likely to be at Worlds. Owen and Reed locked up their invites pretty early, and Huey, it was a sweat. Came down to his, you know, his stretch run there, but then he got a top 8, and that was a great story. So all 3 of them played. And then, so that was kind of our, like, trying to call a shot, you know, hopefully one of them would just win Worlds or at least make the top 4. None of them did. But the finals was between Patrick Chapin and Shahar Shenhar. So after Worlds, we were like, okay, we're going to reverse engineer it now. We're going to go spend time with Chapin and with Shahar. We're going to fly to Jerusalem and build their stories so that we can have their stories in the beginning of the movie. And then it will end up that 2 of our subjects will face each other in the finals of the World Championship. And that will create some dramatic tension. So yeah, those were our like elite competitive players. And then after that, we had Chris, who's kind of the grizzled old vet who had his like Hall of Fame story and his misplay story. Melissa, who's a pioneer, you know, first female to top 8. Had a great story in herself. And then Travis was kind of our like wild card character, who ended up getting cut. But that was the vision, you know, some people thought it was too many subjects, but I think the way we made the film, you know, it was like, I guess we could have just waited until Worlds and just made a thing about Chapin and Shahar, but there honestly wouldn't have been enough there to fill out a movie. So we kind of leaned into this structure, narrative
I eat
structure.
so much of that frozen fried chicken now because of
Oh man, I was so, you know, and honestly, we had to cut so much out of Patrick Chapin's story that I really wanted to. Not every part of his story is brand friendly for Wizards, and since Wizards is funding it, you know, you could make a whole documentary about Patrick, and it would be utterly fascinating. But I'm glad that some of his unique eccentricities did make it into the film. He is truly unlike any other person I've met. And he's really he was also one of our early champions. You know, I mentioned Kibler and Finkel, Pikula, you know, and Patrick was there, you know, right with them, advocating on our behalf. He was one of the people we interviewed in our first video at Pro Tour Philly.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I mean, I'm sure you guys are extremely proud of the end product. You know, just the fact of it getting on a platform like Netflix is just outstanding. You guys did a fantastic job. Although I really want to see the director's cut now. This is all I'm hearing is I just want to see the Travis Wu and more Patrick Chapin.
Yeah, I talked to Sean about that, but I think the version with Travis, it was still in rough cut state, you know, so it just doesn't have the look of like a finished movie. You know, there's just lots of odds and ends missing. It's a little too haphazard, but one of these days I would love to unearth the footage when the time is right. But it's funny, it almost got banhammered, this movie, because we were making it, and then Fox made its deal with Hasbro to acquire the rights, the movie rights to Magic's intellectual property. And so we are not Fox. So we had to slam the brakes on everything for a while. Until they gave us permission to move ahead. You know, and we were like, guys, we are a small indie, 2-person indie documentary unit. There is no way that Fox should be threatened by us when they are planning in the distant future some summer blockbuster where Jace and Chandra are flying around in CGI. You know what I mean? These two things are nothing alike. So, yeah, but there was a while when it looked like we would have to break it into a mini series, you know, and I was really devastated by that, really devastated. And I basically begged Greg to push back, and we pushed and pushed, and I learned a lot about the legal side of filmmaking. You know, like we were always this fly by our pants DIY unit. Like I said, we started making movies in warehouses in Philly. We're not industry people. And I had to learn a lot about that, the legal side, you know, or even just we got Will Wheaton to do the narration, and that involved a whole bunch of paperwork about SAG, you know, and acculturating to some Hollywood norms there as well. So yeah, kind of a crash course. I think that our stuff has gotten better since then. I mean, if we could do it all over again, there's just so many things we would do differently just from a production standpoint. And just in terms of like how we capture stories is very different now for the web series. I think the work now is like better, but it's not as grand. You know, we're making 6 to 10 minute little mini-sodes as opposed to like part 2 or 3 of a feature film or whatever. So,
and that segues into a question that I have. What was the decision really that played into transitioning it from Walking the Plains to Enter the Battlefield as we know it now?
right. So, we were kind of doing both at the same time, and it was kind of just killing me. I couldn't. It was stretching us too thin, and uh, there was also this moment. I was also dealing with being a dad for the first time, so there was some strain on my professional life there. But I think the big thing is we realized that we couldn't go to these events and be shooting for 2 projects anymore. One of the things that I would have done totally differently is that we would make a double episode of Walking the Plains for Worlds, one for individual Worlds and one for the World Magic Cup, which they used to be held at the same time. And on top of that, we were filming the climactic conclusion to our feature film. That was just way too much for 2 people to do in one 4-day span. I mean,
That's a whole buffet on your plate.
Yeah, totally. Imagine trying to eat like a 20-egg omelet. That's what it was like.
Although I'd like to try.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I was a little stung from that. I was also really heartbroken by this whole pay the pros controversy that popped up the day before our documentary released, which I think affected the debut of it. Kind of personally devastated me just because some of our main subjects, you know, Huey, Owen Reed, Chapin, Shahar, I mean, these are platinum pros. And there was this negative PR, you know, scandal right before our documentary about them aired. And, you know, so that definitely dampened things a bit. And I was like, all right, I really need to take some stuff off my plate to really kind of focus on one project. And, you know, I almost, you know, not every TV show can have 10 seasons. You know, some of your favorite TV shows have 4 seasons. And so that's Walking the Plains. We had 4 great seasons. And I felt like I was running out of funny things to write. I was running out of energy to do both projects at the same time. I was coping with some difficult feelings. Like I said, you know, as a bipolar, you know, person, anxiety, depression. I mean, it was affecting me a lot. So focusing on the documentary angle was just a much needed change of pace for me. I wanted to get off camera as well. That's another thing. Like when you're putting your face on everything, it adds like a level of pressure you're put on yourself, you know, to make it your voice. But I was like, I want to focus on other people's voices. I want to just sit behind a camera and tell other people's stories. And I don't want this to be about Nathan Holt so much anymore. And I think a lot of what Walking the Plains was like, here's the magic scene. Here's the magic community as viewed by this zany, weird guy, you know, through my eyes. That's just kind of what the show was. And I loved that. But I needed less pressure on myself in that way.
Yeah. Wow. And just going through some of my personal favorite episodes were the Musashi, the creators that you did about, you know, Brian and Paul Cheon, Jerry T, of course, as we mentioned before. And then and I'm not even saying that, like, my all-time favorite episode of anything was Going Home Again. And I don't know why. It just I'm not even joking. Like it hit me like in the feels. I commented on that right away. If you want to pull that up, like I was getting emotional at certain points, and it was just such I don't want to say it felt like a send off on camera again. And I thought the best episodes were with you and your family, like the whole skit at Thanksgiving dinner. But this one was just so like raw and personal and just absolutely fantastic. I just want to thank you for sharing all that. It was just so good. And especially it spotlighted those moments of like, I have siblings and they're in other states, of just family and family that's not kind of in the same city all the time. I don't know. It just, go watch that episode. Watching this, it's just really.
Oh man, well, I can't really begin to like say generation to the next. So we did this piece on Dana Fisher, which felt like a natural fit. You know, she's a person of great interest right now to the Magic community.
Also great episode.
Yeah, that and all of that is in my comfort zone. To do one about my own family, it was easier for me to write comedy where my family could just be like silly cartoon versions of ourselves. I've always felt more comfortable in a character than just as myself. This one was like weird. I didn't know how to be objective about it. Maria Bartholdi did a really great job editing it. Yeah, and so between her and Sean, I was like, guys, I don't know what to tell you for this one. It's impossible for me to be objective. Everything seems so schmaltzy to me. You know, I don't, will the audience like this, or will they just think, you know, this is too Spielberg or something? It's too like sappy or something. But they were like, no, this is good. You know, trust us. And I was like, okay, you guys take the key to this car. I'm just going to stand where you want me to. And, you know, and honestly, it was like a cool excuse to visit my older siblings and their families. I only get to see them usually like once a year, you know? So this was like, oh, this will be a really cool excuse for me to just go and hang out with them and play Magic. Yeah, they were real sports about it. You know, it's cool when how many times do you teach somebody how to play Magic and they really love it? You know, where they're texting you 2 days later, like, wait, how does First Strike work again? And you're like, got them, you know, like, you know, like that's when you know they're hooked, you know. So that to have that with my brother and my nephew and my sister and her kids, was really cool. And if anybody enjoyed that, then I see that as icing on the cake.
It was an absolutely breath of fresh air from the viewer standpoint, because when you get so entrenched in the game as you are, as I am, as other content creators and everything, there is a certain amount of just visceral garbage sometimes that builds up, and there's that side, which you know, you could definitely choose to turn a blind eye to, or just not be involved in. And then there's the just heavy grinder competitive side. There's all these sides to Magic, and that's what makes it such a great game. But to scale it back to those kind of teaching a younger person, or just see those, because you could see with your nephew, like some of those moments, like those aha, those click moments, to capture that on film is really what Magic is about as a whole. It's about sitting there with you know, sleeveless cards and really, you know, bending them and nicking the corners, and just the discovery is just so
totally.
That's really what it's about.
I
just loved it so much.
4 cards in hand, 2 creatures on the battlefield. Your opponent's at 7 life, and you're like, man, I have these 4 things, and I don't know how to win. And then you start doing, wait, if I do this, then attack, he blocks like that. Then I do this and this, then I win. Right. And you know what I mean? And you put like 6 thoughts together in a way that you have never in the rest of your life done, you know? And it's like this part of your brain just comes alive. And I think that it's such a rush, you know, to like untap your brain and your imagination, and in a social dynamic, you know. I feel like it's just to me, that's why people get so hooked on Magic. You know, you want to keep getting back to that. You keep biting, you know, you keep taking on more challenges, pushing yourself. Okay, well now, all right, I did it with the dual decks. Now let me do it at Friday Night Magic, and you can keep doing it until you're like a world champion 5 times over. There's no, it is unlimited. There is always another aha moment that you can have, but it's really important to remember those first ones so that you know what it is you really love about it, you know, so you don't get too caught up in just tweaking the 15th card in your sideboard and agonizing over it, you know.
So. Right. Or it leads you down the path to creation and talking about the game or being a historian of the game. It's just so weird how this little card game has just transposed into this giant multiverse of just possibilities and livelihoods, and it just really is something for everybody. And it's just, yeah, it's crazy to sit there and think about it. When I was 12 years old also, I would have never thought I would still be involved in this thing in one way or another, and be as involved I am as an adult with 4 kids running around. But I know we're kind of up against it on time. We're kind of over on time, but what is, I know this is kind of a loaded, kind of a big question, but what are the plans for the future?
Yeah, good question. So we have no plans to stop making Enter the Battlefield. I love it. You know, Sean loves it. It's become a really cool feature of Pro Tour coverage, you know, during these lunch breaks that the players have between draft and constructed. So hopefully we can just keep on doing that. Certainly open to new projects. We did film a project about our play group, a little more semi-autobiographical stuff that I'm hoping will air soon. We do make these like littler videos when the new major sets come out that feature like more in-store experiences, which I love, like talking to FNMers, talking to like, you know, normal Magic players, not just platinum pros or celebrities or whatever. So, you know, more of that type of content. You can look forward to the Grand Prix Las Vegas video that we're going to make, which is, again, more focused on your everyday Magic card, but also some footage of a beta Rochester draft.
No big deal,
you know,
right?
No big deal. You know, a nice cosplay segment that we're doing there. And you can look forward to something I have been trying to make happen for a long time, and I'm so psyched that we're doing it, is we're doing an episode. This is the first time I'm saying this in public, by the way. So I hope I'm allowed to say this. But yeah, you got a scoop. We're in Philadelphia, and so is the University of Pennsylvania. The University of Pennsylvania is where Richard Garfield went to grad school as a mathematics student, and it is there that he created Magic the Gathering. And it was there that the first games of Magic were played. With his original playtest crew, you know, as they made Alpha, not the Alpha that we know from, you know, priceless booster packs, but rather little white cards with photocopied images of Calvin and Hobbes, or some, like, you know, comic strip image of a zombie or something, that these handmade cards that Richard made that they would play with. So we're doing an episode about a few of his original collaborators, including a pretty rare appearance by the first Magic player. His name is Barry Reich, who played the first game of Magic with Richard in the Astronomy Lounge at UPenn. They played not one game, but many games. And they played, you know, they thought it was like 4 a.m. They were like, we better stop. It's probably 4 a.m. by now. They didn't have a wristwatch. They walked outside. It was 9:30 in the morning. So how cool is that? The first games of Magic, they played all night long. And so we've got that whole story. So, you know, 25th anniversary, it was the right time to do this. So that's our next episode for Pro Tour 25th anniversary.
God, thank you so much for scooping that here. That's awesome.
Yeah, go ahead. Tweet it out. If I get in trouble for that, that's fine. I'll deal with it.
Just blame me. It's fine.
Yeah.
Dude, that's incredible. I always that was like, if I ever met Richard Garfield, that would be one of the things that I think I would want to ask him, is just like, did you think that it was going to be this? Did you think that this game that you were making to kind of the in between for D&D rounds would be this? Like, it's just absolutely incredible.
He did not. He's not a greedy guy. He wasn't doing it for the money. I know that they were trying to market it as a game at these conventions, but I mean, the way people describe Richard is that he was constantly making games all the time. You met him, you play bridge or spades, and he would have like 5 new rules. Okay, let's play chess, but here's 5 new rules for chess. You go to a diner with him and sit down, and within 2 minutes, he would have invented a game with the salt and pepper shaker and the sugar packets. Like, this is just who he was. And his love of games was just pretty infectious. And, who knew? I mean, they were making the game for graduate students. These people were graduate students in math, in computer science, engineering, Nobody knew that it would catch on with 12-year-olds, and high school students. They never thought, that the game would be that. They thought it would be for hardcore gamers, D&D players who were used to a billion rules. And Magic does have like a billion rules. So they never saw it being like a pop culture phenomenon. And they never printed enough cards to meet the demand, until Chronicles or whatever. But that's a whole other story.
That was a mistake.
Yeah, that's another story for another day. So, yeah, I loved it. Richard is a lovely guy. I got to meet him in person once, and Sean's going to fly out and interview him again. I can't join him this time, but I've been in email contact with Richard. He just had twins, and he still finds time to email us. So, God bless him. Yeah.
God, that's fantastic. This has been, I say this a lot, but this has been one of my favorite experiences, not just doing a show like this, but just in my, like, a Magic experience ever. Talking to you, you're just absolutely fantastic, Nathan.
Oh, thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much.
You're a gentleman and a great interviewer. So I had fun today.
Coming from you, that is everything. So I really, really appreciate that. Where can everyone find you, Nathan?
Just Google Enter the Battlefield or Walking the Plains. Queue up an episode from the playlist, give it a watch. That is my mission on this earth right now, is just, I want people to enjoy that work. So, I'm not really promoting myself so much as those shows, Enter the Battlefield and Walking the Plains, which we don't make anymore, but there's 41 episodes there that, they all start with a piece of sketch comedy that I wanted to make, immortal, like that wouldn't just be tied to a specific moment in Magic. So, go back and watch those. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Again, you could find me, Jon Dunning, right here on this very channel. They said, we said. You could also find me on Twitter at Orzovdun. You could find me on Facebook and Instagram at Jon Dunning. This is the last time we'll see this set in this kind of state. We're taking this on the road. We're collapsing Sarah's realm, so to speak. So, Aquaman and Batman and everybody will probably still make an appearance in the new set. But for the next couple of weeks, I'll be taking the show on the road. I will kind of be spoiling that a little bit later. But yeah, thank you so much for everyone coming on. Thank you again to Cardsphere for making this awesome show happen. Again, thank you, Nathan Holt. And until next time, Planeswalkers, I will see you all in the multiverse.
Thanks, John.